Hi, I'm John Muir Laws. I am a naturalist. I'm a wildlife biologist with a sketchbook. And I really love drawing and sketching in nature. And owls are just intoxicating. Owls, there's such great structure there. Really fun to draw. Last time we worked at kind of blocking in the shape of an owl and thinking about the owl's head, some of the proportions, and we looked at that, a couple of strategies of drawing owl heads across a number of species. Today, we are going to be looking at a little bit of owl structure, but we're also going to be taking a look at a lot of owl texture and how to make the feathers of the owl and all the details of of those bodies, how to kind of pull those out in your drawings. I'm going to be using primarily pencil and also taking a little bit of a look at watercolor and perhaps some colored pencil. You don't have to have the same tools that I use. These will be, by and large, ideas that you can use across a bunch of different media. But for the watercolor one, that one is a little bit more kind of watercolory. But we're also then going to take our owls and we're going to think about putting them in the environment that we find them in. One of the things that's neat about owls is they're incredibly cryptic. So their body patterns are set up so that no one finds them during the day so they can get a really, really good day's sleep. So then when they're out hunting at night, they're feeling fresh. But if jays and things are constantly coming in and knocking at you and bothering you while you are trying to get your day's beauty rest, that makes things a lot more difficult. So incredibly cryptic patterns. How can you draw them with those patterns and place them in their environment? Ideally, they will kind of blend into the environment that you create for them. And so we'll take a look at a few strategies to help you be able to do that. A question somebody asked is, should you get your watercolors, have them handy? You may if you wish to, but it is not required. I'm going to suggest, though, that everybody, as we're kind of working along here, as much as you can, follow along. If you see somebody demonstrate a technique on drawing something and you kind of watch it, your brain will quickly forget those ideas. But if, as I'm doing it, like you're trying it, you're doing it, like don't worry, but by looking down at your paper, you're going to miss something. Key points I'm going to be repeating a few times and pointing at it. But if you're following along with it and end up with the pages filled with owly notes, that is going to really help that information stick in your head in a much more useful way. So thank you all for being here. Let's bump over to my document camera. And I am going to share that so you'll be able to, on one side, see some reference materials that I'm looking at. And on the other side, I'm going to be drawing and sketching with these owls. And I'm going to share my screen. Hey, Mar, checking in. Can you see on the right-hand side my my page, and on the left a little thing that says owls?
Yes, I can.
There is a big time delay that I'm seeing on my side. Are you seeing a lag? Watch, when you hear me clap, I will be clapping, and then look for the clap on your screen.
Yes.
Wow, so you're seeing that too.
Yes.
Let me see if there's anything else that I can turn off on my computer to see if I can make my computer go a little bit faster. Hopefully it will just be that things are, let's see if that improves things. Wow. Why don't I start this demonstration? If it ends up being really distracting, what I can try to do is, at this point, I think probably log out of Zoom and log back in. But that, let's see if we can avoid that. So I'm going to start with this. You let me know if I need to try to re-enter Zoom. Ready to give it a shot?
Sure.
All right. So here we go. Let's start with a little bit about the windows to the soul of the owl. We've got these wonderful owl eyes. Owls have huge eyes. If you see this diagram over on the right-hand side here, this area in the back is where the owl's brain goes. This whole part in here, this is how big the eye space is for owls. So most of their head is these giant eyes that are, they've got a sort of lens held in the front and then they swing out in the back. If you look at them from the side, there is a thick membrane, the cornea on the outside, and then on the inside of that is a colored iris. The pupil is the dark hole in the middle. This little black layer that you see where my cursor is, that is the iris of the eye. Let's take a look at this sort of owl face here. And we're going to first just start by kind of giving owl eyes a little bit of extra love. And if we can really make those pop on our page, then things are going to be a lot of fun. Everybody, the first place they look on your drawing is going to be those owl eyes. So how do we handle that? Well, first, let's just sort of notice a few things about it. The space between these eyes is a little bit larger than one of the eyes themselves, but I can use one of the eyes as a spacer to help me kind of get that distance. So once I have an owl eye, once I say I have the space between the owl's eyes, I can then put in those eyes relative to that. So getting the eyes the right size relative to the space between them is going to be one little challenge. The way that I handle that on my page is I will first make, let's say this is if I draw a circle for the head of my owl, and I'm going to pass a vertical line down the middle of that and figure out how high in that owl's head its eyes are. I'm going to put my little spacer of 2 dots on either side. And then what I'm going to do is draw a little dot on either side of that to be the width of the eye. And I want to make that slightly smaller than that space between the eyes. The owl eye shape that you see on the left is something that, so this is sort of an owl eye shape that you're going to see a lot. And let's just kind of focus in on that. On the top part, I'm going to come up with a little bit of down at the end. So up, a little bit down on the end. Then think of the far side of the eye as sweeping down more. So I'm going to make a little curve down on either side. And from there, you're going to come back up to the eye.
the corner of the eye. Kind of gets this stern look there. So I made a little V across the top. I swung down, gave it that side of the eye, and then I have the bottom part.
Let's place our pupils. Take a close look at these pupils. There's something really weird going on about them. Isn't that cool? Look at the size of the pupils. If you looked at a human being and you saw this, it would be evidence of a brain injury. But this is the way that owls are set up. One pupil is, in this case, you're looking at one is larger than the other. And the reason is, with human beings, both of our pupils dilate in synchrony. In owls, the one that is in shade is more open. So its pupils can dilate independently, and it's not a sign of brain damage. We're seeing those, because this owl is looking straight towards me, we're seeing those eyes,
those pupils sort of right in the middle of the eyes. And so one of them is a smaller circle. The other is a larger circle. I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit of kind of hatching across those to fill them in. There's also a little bit of skin around the eyes, so I can make this line that goes around them, in some cases a little bit thicker, and a line that kind of in some places is thicker, in some places thinner, is going to be visually a lot more interesting than a line that is consistent width all the way around. If I am looking at a,
let's now take a look at this shadow on this eye. Notice that on the eye on the left-hand side, you are seeing a little, you're seeing that shadow that is kind of cast across the iris itself. The other eye is all in shadow, but one of these has that shadow across the top.
so the iris is set back from the edge of the eye, so that you're actually, you can see a shadow across that.
The final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a little highlight. You see that little reflection of sunlight? I'm going to drop that into my owl eye.
You can do that if you're kind of planning ahead. Sometimes if you're drawing in your pupil, you can just sort of leave a little space.
And then you have that. If you forgot to do that, you can erase it back in.
Something that I like to do is have that shadow cross both that reflection, sorry, have it cross both the iris and the pupil. That makes it really clear that it is not just a speck, a white speck that is back there on the iris, on that yellow part, but it's actually something that is on the surface above both of those. If we're doing this with color, you would just be painting in around that spot. Now I've got a little bit of reflection there from wet paint. I'm going to just let that paint dry with a little bit of help from my hairdryer here. And then what I'll sometimes do is just kind of come in with another color here, a little bit of a sort of orangish gray mixture, and just put a little bit of color into those shadow areas. Makes the eye just look, makes the eye look wet. That highlight really, this eye over here doesn't look as wet because we don't see a really clear highlight on it. That highlight does a great job of really kind of making your eye kind of glisten. I'm going to drop a little bit of paint down into the pupils here. And then just a hint around the outside edge of this, and that will really pop those eyes. Oh, that one's, see my paint, that wasn't really dry, so my paint is kind of getting away from me. But that is kind of a quick first pass at playing with some owl eyes. Again, the first place everybody looks at in your drawing is going to be the eyes. The same is true with pictures of human beings. So people will often spend a little bit more time. You know, Robert Bateman will often have a lot of detail right around the eye of whatever animal that he's doing, and the rest of it can be loosely handled. And you get this effect when you look at it, like, wow, that's a really detailed drawing. To help this eye sort of sit into the feathers, there's a little bit of kind of extra structure that I'm going to put in here. I'm going to suggest that there is sort of a, almost like my owl's a little bit sleepy. I'm going to draw a line down with a few little kind of hatch marks across it to suggest that this is feathers. If I just sort of draw a line like this, you might think that this is hard skin. But if I just draw a line that comes down like this, but the minute I kind of just, I'm gonna put a few little kind of hatch marks around it, then it is starting to feel like, oh, this little owl, those are feathers in this ring around our eye. So if I pay just a little bit of attention to those feathers that go right around the eye, that is going to really pop those out. In addition, if your owl has bold black marks around its eye, getting those in there are really going to help this owl feel owly, kind of have its intense stare. So with my pencil here, this is just a graphite pencil, I'm first kind of just putting in that I've got some dark, major dark marks like this. And then I'm going to come in on top of that and put in a few of just little kind of sort of lighter kind of detail marks across that. And that makes this feel that we're talking about sort of feathery things. Here, kind of in that face, to the top of that sort of the bristly part, I think I'm putting in a few little kind of dark marks in here to the bristles that go over the beak.
Jack, I'm going to try disabling your video for now to see if the lag improves.
Sorry, say again?
I think I'm going to try disabling the camera feed on you for now and keep the screen share on just to see if it improves the lag on the document camera.
Oh, okay, great. Or actually, there's one other thing that I could try. No, actually, the Zoom. Yeah, let's give that a try. See what you get. So, have you disabled it?
Yeah.
I go 1, 2. That's a slight improvement in the lag. What I'm trying to do on my end is I'm trying to
draw something and say something about what I drew a few seconds after I'm doing it, which kind of makes me have to, it's some kind of weird mental gymnastics here, but I'm trying to kind of have a delay between what I show and what I, and the, or what I say and when I'm actually doing it to try to make up for that. Right. Let's take another look at something interesting with owl eyes. All right, so here on this beautiful bird here, notice the difference in the size of the pupils. This one over here in shadow again. And notice there's a little that same sort of eye shape that you have an eye that I'm going to sort of on the one on the left here, we're going to kind of come up. You're going to swing down for the far edge of it and then kind of back to that corner. That can give you kind of a nice sort of owl eye feeling to it. Here we see that same shape kind of, so we're going to come up and a little bit of down, swing down and then back in. That kind of looking for that top shape, that side coming down and then curl back into the front. Again, you're going to see that same eye shape on a whole bunch of owls. Then whatever kind of dark lines you see right around the eyes, we're going to put those in the sort of I'm sleepy marks, or the skin right around the eyes, a little bit of tissue right around there, and then those dark lines around there. That's going to really pop your owl eyes out a little bit more. Now let's take a look at a slightly different phenomenon. Over here on this owl, there is, let's actually zoom in and close on this one's face. What I want you to do is look at how centered the pupils are on this. And you'll notice that it looks like one of these pupils is much more towards the center than the other. All right, so this owl eye on the side, it doesn't look like the dark spots right in the middle of it. Let's jump back to this one, take a close look at that far eye, and you're seeing the same thing. This one looks like it's straight at you. This one looks like it's kind of looking at its nose. This phenomenon that you're seeing is due to the fact that that pupil is recessed back there on the iris, away from the front edge surface of the eye. So very often you're going to get this almost cross-eyed look on your owls, that if the owl's head is tilted even a little bit away from you, here, this side of the head is just slightly tilted away from you more. If you look at the curve of the beak is going this way, that means we're seeing more of this side than this side. We're seeing a little bit more feathers out beyond the facial disc here than we see here. So this bird is looking a little bit towards this side. The result is that where you see that pupil, we see that being closer to the center line and not in the middle of that yellow space. If you are not expecting to see this, it's really easy for us to put our owl eyes right in the middle of the eye and make them symmetrical, because we think that that's the way it's supposed to be. But having noticed this, we'll then be able to give our owls with a slight 3/4 view look. We're going to be able to draw that much more effectively. So let's actually do that on this little screech owl. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw myself a little owl head. And we're going to block this one in for sort of a 3/4 view look. And its eyes are kind of coming kind of closer to the top here. I'm going to give myself my spacer. And here, the space between the eyes is pretty close to the width of those eyes. All right, so if that's my spacer, and then my eyes there, I'm going to need a wider head, won't I? Okay, I can do that. So I've got my other eye that's going to be roughly in here, one eye that's going to be roughly in here. So I'm going to start with a little vertical on the inside. I am going to come up and hook that down. On the far side, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to make that eye a little bit narrower. Then swing down the sides of the eyes and diagonally back up. My beak is going to be coming down in here. So it's going to be, it's a slightly curved this way. Most of that beak is going to be hiding in those feathers. So this is one of the ones with kind of an X face. So I have a big kind of V of owl face coming up in front of me. It's going to be flat across the top. I have a little ear tuft sticking up on one side, a little ear tuft sticking up on the other. There is that triangle of bristles right around the beak that are kind of coming down in this area here and this area here. On the far side, on the left side of this owl's head, I can see a little bit of the back of the head, but I'm not seeing that on the right. So I'm putting a little triangle there, and this gets my owl just looking over to the right a little bit. This eye is going to be more centered. Actually, it's going to be a little bit closer to the inside. And the one on the other side, this is the one that is going to be really weird to draw. I'm going to make it larger. And more towards the center. It feels really weird to draw that eye. Let's see what dark marks this owl has around its eyes. All right, so I'm going to come down from the eye. And what I'm doing is just making a little kind of squiggly mark back and forth with my pencil. Up over the eye, kind of Angry Bird style. And then we see that kind of going at a very kind of clear angle on the right side. You see kind of a broader one going up on the left. And those dark lines connect into the bottom of the ear tufts. So those tufts actually are not ears, they're little tufts of feathers, but those horns, or what kind of look like ears, those are the bottoms. Bottoms of those, the dark line kind of matches up into those zones. If this is the center line of my head, I have a little V, kind of a widow's peak coming down into that. This is interesting. Take a look on my drawing at the distance between my eye and the bottom of this. Notice that there's this big space here. You could fit an eye and a half in here, and it's less than half an eye on the one on the photograph. So I've made a mistake in my proportions. There's a big tendency, which we have when we do something like that, to just ignore it and kind of go on and work with this because I put that line in. But if early on in my drawing, and it's still early in this drawing, I kind of go like, oh, wait a minute. Actually, I want that coming in somewhere in here. How far back? Maybe for back like this, then swing along. And how go out to the corner of the eye in there. Okay, just like that. So you see, like first I had it down here, then I had it coming all the way out here, then in here, right? If I respond to that and modify it, I'm going to be so much happier later on in my drawing. But there's a big tendency that at least I have to kind of want to kind of go like, oh, that line is there, so I'm going to work with it. Now, this bird is incredibly cryptic, so the patterns that are on it are meant to blend in with the oak behind it. So knowing that, I'm going to try to bring in sort of a lot of that sort of randomness, sort of a sense of that randomness into the drawing. But there are still kind of clear patterns that are going on. For instance, up here on top of its head, I have this V of slightly darker. So what I'm going to do is just put an area of tone across that. I'm thinking in terms of darks and lights. Here's the way I think about it. I have my darkest darks that are about this dark. I have a middle tone that's about like this. And then I'm going to have just sort of the white of my paper. And a very kind of simple value range like that is going to make it a lot easier for me to be able to kind of fill in these values. I don't have to worry about a whole bunch of different shades of gray here. My beak is disappearing into my feathers here. Let me just play with its forehead a little bit. So there are these two white bars going up over those eyes, and they kind of get feathery out. And so rather, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of make the top edges of this thing kind of a little bit more random. And then there's a few, I'm making just sort of little kind of streaks like this. And that blurs those darks into those lights. I'm also going to bring some of these more of these kind of random darky spots into that middle tone. I'm going to have some of those come over here into this side. And I'm trying to do is trying to get these to be what I call regularly irregular. So these spots, I'm not trying to do this, where I've got a series of spots that are symmetrical. I'm going to try to make these regularly irregular. So some bigger, some smaller. Across that little owl forehead. Now let me go into these feather tufts, the big air quotes horns or ears of the owl. These are made by a series of feathers that overlap on each other, something like that. And you're not going to see the edges of those, but knowing that, and I'm going to put a little notch in this one to be sort of a place where kind of know that this is like a little break in one of those feathers. So in that outside edge of the feather, sometimes just to sort of show that this is a feather, you can kind of give them, you know, that outer edge, a little bit of more of a feather-like detail. And then the bottom edges of these are dark. And then I'm going to just bring these random spots in over on that other side. Now I'm going to swing down into these ear patches on either side. And what I want to notice is that there's a series of feathers in rings that go around this face. So you can actually see some little lines in here. But I want this effect to be subtle. If you squint at the drawing, the photograph of the bird, you'll see that there's the evidence that there are these kind of concentric rings of feathers in here. It's subtle. It's subtle. And I'm going to try to have that kind of as an effect up in here on this eye and down in here on this eye. So I'm just making sort of lightly with my pencil, kind of an initial ring, then I'm coming out a little bit bigger than that, and this will be kind of an area in here. What I'm doing is I'm kind of going to the outside edge of the ring. Let's say I have a ring like this, and I'm making just a few little kind of marks with my pencil tip, kind of coming in from that. So So if any of these pencil lines show up, they will suggest this little kind of fanning out effect. And there's blotches in it too, so I can add in a few of those little blotches, trying to be, again, consistently inconsistent. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the far side. There's going to be, I want there to be a suggestion that there are these sort of zones of feathers, but I don't want it to be too dramatic. Sometimes the fact that I know that there is some structure in something, sometimes that makes me overdo it. I'm going to come down. Here's the back of my owl's head. And this area back here, I'm going to give it an area of tone. And then just introduce those consistently inconsistent little marks, a few little marks kind of going out from it, a number of smaller ones kind of going around the side. Very often you'll see this sort of a pattern on owl feathers where there'll be kind of one central mark that comes down. And then there are crossbars that go across it. So I'm just going to get a little jiggle in my pencil. So a little suggestion of lines in both directions.
So around the beak and the mouth of this little owl,
There's that
that sort of triangle zone in here
of whiskers. I can put in the general direction that those go. And they are heavier towards the bottom. So what I'm going to do is watch this. I'm going to come towards the bottom here and put my pencil toward the bottom, just kind of flick up a few places, and that makes that bottom edge a little bit heavier. I'm going to do that on the other side as well. So the feathers kind of come in here like that, and then I can switch those up in there. Down below that
is an area of smaller feathers.
some of them are pointing towards you edge on. So I'm going to handle that just by a few little kind of horizontal lines in here.
And my little owlet has a chin.
Something that's nice about the combination of watercolor with pencil is that you can do something like this as a pencil drawing. And then you can also, and you can leave it just as a pencil drawing, and it's fine. Actually, let's put down a little bit of stuff around this one's chest, just because we can start to play with that. So before we kind of get over to pencil, what I want to do is just look at the pattern on this owl and just notice how asymmetrical it is. I'm seeing over here on one side, I'm seeing this sort of larger dark area that's squinched up in here, and I don't sort of see that as continuous. I've got these little asymmetrical marks here. It's not that if there's a mark here, there's going to be a parallel mark right on the other side. I want to kind of get a sense of this randomness in here. So if this is the center line of the tummy of my bird, let's see, we got that owl, and then come on here. This owl's. I'm going to put in some of these marks. And again, I'm intentionally it is weird to both to talk and to teach it and to draw at the same time, but I found it's also really kind of makes my brain hurt when if I try to say what my pencil did a few seconds ago rather than what I'm doing right at the moment, but I'm trying to do it. So I'm going to just put in a few little vertical streaks down here, and notice I'm making these ones kind of thin in here. And look at the pattern that I've got here. This is not an exact clone of what is gone on the other side, but generally speaking, there's some sort of medium-sized streaks here towards the edge, some skinnier streaks. We'll see in just a moment kind of why I'm doing that and why that's important. And then there are horizontals, right? There are little horizontal marks that are kind of coming across these. And here in this area, I'm going to make these kind of come, I want to imagine the can again. I want to imagine a can, and I'm going to be wrapping these down this way across the front. So some of these lines are going to come down. if I try to match it line for line, stripe for stripe, I'm going to go nuts. All right. So I can leave this little owl friend here as a pencil drawing. I also can work with something like this with watercolor. And I just want to do a little demo of how nicely watercolor plays with pencil. I've established most of my details with the pencil. And so I want that to show through, and it will. The brush that I'm going to be using is this one here. This is called a Pentel Aquash water brush. It's their large size one. And it has the water up in the handle of it. So what I can do is when I want some paint, I just wipe this brush. I don't have to dip it into water anywhere. I just wipe this brush into my palette, and then sort of I can see what colors I have. Okay, there's sort of here's a sort of a gray color, right? Which is what I want. What I'm going to do is mix up some paint that's transparent so I can see through it. So if I paint over some lines here, you'll be able to see those lines through it. I want all these little details in my owl popping out. And then I squint at the owl, and I squint at my drawing, and I squint at the owl, and I squint at my drawing, and I say to myself, where there on the owl am I seeing sort of darker areas? Well, I've got this zone here kind of coming up the top of the head. I've got this here, these little zones. I have the back of my head. There's a little bit of pale in these areas, and then there's dark down there. And then what about the chest of this? Well, it's a little bit kind of blotchy, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of get a little bit blotchy. So in this area, I'm going to put a little blotch in here, a little blotch down in here, a little blotch in there. What color is it? It's mostly gray, but maybe there's a little hint of brown. Test my color before I kind of come in here. So there's a little hint of some brown in there. Maybe a little hint of some brown coming up the middle of the head. And maybe I'll put another little kind of hint of some brown in here. But I'm letting that be just really kind of loose and blotchy. I clean my brush just by, on a little rag, I can squeeze my brush and it cleans it. Now, let me take a look at those eyes. I have a little bit of yellow on my brush, and I want to make sure that I don't get too intense yellow, but that'll work. And while those eyes are drying, I'm going to test the, most of this, oh, no, it's still wet on the forehead. I'm going to give uh, hit this with the hairdryer for just a moment. Out in the field, I have the sun pounding down on my paper and it dries my page quickly. In the studio, I keep a little hairdryer on hand.
Well, that's drying, Jack. Just a quick time check. You have 32 minutes left.
Okay. So part of what's going to make this work is just for me to be kind of, I want there to be sort of irregularities and in the feeling of this. And finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some really dark paint. Here, sort of a dark, mixing up kind of a darkish brown. Some dark brown. And how does that look on the page? Yeah, it's pretty dark. And then I can just put that in, and I'm going to go slowly around where the eyes are because everybody looks at the eyes. And you see that that contrast really makes those eyes pop. I think I put too much eyeliner around the bottom of that eye right there. Now just a little bit of this dark on top of those other washes. And what I got now is sort of a little kind of stutter in my hand. So as I'm putting in these marks, my hand is sort of vibrating a little bit so that I get an uneven line. If I did this kind of dark detailing close to the start of the drawing, then as I put in other washes and things, it would sort of smudge around all that kind of dark detail. You don't have to follow your pencil lines exactly, right? So if I'm kind of roughly showing something with my pencil, I'm going to let my pencil still kind of carry part of the drawing. This area in here is looking a little bit less interesting to me. So I'm going to put a little bit of detail in. I'm going to take my brush tip and fan it out. And so I can get it just a hint of some of that ring in there. On this little owl, I'm going to take a white pen and put my highlight in with that white pen. That one I don't want to be quite as bright, so I'm going to tap it lightly with my finger. And finally, I'm going to take this owl and place it. Oh, I forgot that neat shadow on the eye. That's what my eye was missing, that little shadow zone. Right up in here. Oh, that's looking better. But now I want this owl to feel like it's in an environment. So this owl is sitting in its little hole here in the tree. And I want to give you the sense that this owl is in a place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a lot of these same colors just to sort of build up some of the environment around this. So this owl is going to be in a little hole, and we're going to have an edge of that hole kind of coming down here. And the edge of my hole kind of coming here. So I'll just take some of the same kinds of colors. If I use the same sorts of colors that I used on my owl, and I put those into the environment around it, then the owl will feel much more like it is a part of that environment. So those same colors are reflecting kind of back. There's a little bit of the outside of my owl's hole. And the inside is dark. So what I'm going to do is I can paint fairly loosely and quickly, sort of out here when I'm away from my owl. But then when I get close to the owl, I just take the tip of the brush, trace it along. Really let that go dark in there. And then I'll take that same sort of dark shadow color and I'll use it to make a little bit of texture of the wood that is around here. So I'm going to take actually I'm going to switch brushes. I'm going to switch over to, this is a flat brush. And it allows me to make some textures that feel really kind of natural and organic. I'm going to get a little bit of paint on here, test it off on the side. There we go. And I just I let the brush sort of tip, kind of curve around and flick around, suggesting some cracks in the wood here. Oh, God. Okay. sure why that little panel is popping out on the side again. Oh. I guess I'm not going to fight it. I can also get more of a kind of scratchy feeling with this brush. What I want is that just sort of a texture that is different than the owl, but I've got sort of similarities between how they were handled. And my owl has a little hole that it can look up out of.
We've gotten a couple of people asking questions about the beak on this. Is there anything you would do to make it pop, or do you kind of like leaving it like that?
The beak here, owl beaks really tuck into their feathers and they curve down against the chest. So you don't want to overemphasize the beak. In this, I can take a little bit of, and I can kind of maybe hit a little, nope. A little bit into the sort of the bottom part of it, maybe get a little bit of tone into the top, but I'm going to keep the beak subtle because actually what I can do is I can make the edges of that beak pop out a little bit. Notice that there are some dark feathers around, especially at the top of that beak. Thank you for pointing that out. So I will kind of get in here and make some of the feathers that are around the top edge of this beak a little bit stronger. But by and large, I'm going to keep that beak more subtle because again, it sits flush with the feathers, and I'm going to let that dry a little bit while I show a couple of other little owly tricks. So we'll be coming back to our friend in just a moment. So does this strange panel keep? Oh, I see why. It's because I had my paint palette sitting up on top of the action keys. All right. So let's just look a little bit more at some owl structure. And
and a little bit of some strategies with owl body here. So on this one, remember we talked before about you've got the back bump, you got that, what is that, sort of the line along the back of the owl. I then put in a little spacer where my head is. Oh, we're not on the screen. And then negative shape in the front, putting in a ball for my body. And but let's say we've talked a lot about kind of putting in the details on the heads here. But let's say you wanted to work on your body a little bit more. I want to show you a few tricks on the back and wing of the owl, as well as the breast of the owl, that will help you kind of be able to draw these guys at different angles. For the back and the wing, on this little owl here, we first of all got right in somewhere about here, my breast feathers are all kind of fluffed up. But what's going on here with the back is really interesting. Notice that there's a large pile of feathers in here, in this zone of my owl, with big white spots on it. Those are what are called the scapular feathers. And they cover up the top edge of the wing. And on owls, they're really big and prominent, just like they are on diurnal raptors. So there's a little bit of just as sort of back feathers up in here, but this pile right here with these big white dots on it, those are my scapular feathers, and they make a big significant mark across the back of the bird. The bottom feathers in the scapulars get larger and larger and larger. And so if those have marks on them, like white spots, then you'll end up with this pattern of having, you know, like really big white spots right down in here. Sticking out from underneath that is the rest of the wing. And if you, and for here, I'm going to emphasize two parts of that wing. I'm going to emphasize what are called the secondary feathers, which is this little wedge, sort of block of feathers coming down here to a corner, down across like this. So those are a set of feathers that sit on top of this wedge here that are called the primary feathers. See these feathers here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feathers sticking out in a nice symmetrical row from underneath this pile here. So think of on the back of your owl as having this pile of secondary feathers, and sticking out from underneath that is this wedge of primary feathers. The sizes of these secondaries and the size of the primaries is going to be different on different species of owls. So on this little owl here, on this boreal owl, that you see a lot of primary feathers sticking out. On, say, a great horned owl, it would be mostly secondaries, and it'd just be a tiny little stub. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. The other thing you can see happening here is this is the bird's tail. This little pad of feathers that is sticking out right here, that's its tail sticking out from behind there. So if I put the tail in like this, it ends up being about the same length as the wing, and this becomes kind of a visually confusing moment in the drawing. That's the moment at which this photographer snapped the picture. But the next moment, that bird could have raised its tail up just a little bit. Now the tail is sticking out like this. And then it's a little bit less visually confusing what's going on. But be aware that when you get things like your tail and your wings all kind of clumping together, it can make for a kind of a confusing zone down here on the bottom of the bird.
scapular feathers, secondary feathers, primary feathers sticking out underneath that.
Let's take a look at it. Same arrangement on a different bird. Here, a great horned owl. This is its tail sticking out on either side of the wing. So a wing going down on this side, a wing going down on this side. Can you see, even though it's all kind of cryptically patterned, the pile of big scapular feathers that goes across the back of the bird? That's what you're seeing in here. These are the secondary feathers coming down in a big blob. And its primary feathers are just tucked right underneath here. So we really don't see much of those sticking out. So on a great horned owl, you're going to see the secondaries as a much more sort of bold pattern across the side of the bird. If you're drawing in these sorts of patterns, let's say I have an owl here, and give me a little spacer for my owl head. Other side of my owl head comes down. Let's say I'm drawing in patterns on the back end of this, on the back side of this bird. Scapulars in here. A great way of handling that is just with an area of tone. Squint at the bird, and you'll notice that you mostly see this as, even though it's made out of all these little fine lines, as an area of tone.
You have a little under 10 minutes left.
Okay. So I would start just by putting some tone in. I can smear that around to make it even smoother. You can also use something like this, which is a little smudging tool. And here is the back of this bird. And then I could come across that with just sort of a hint of, there are little lines and sort of texture marks in here in my owl. If you try to copy it line for line, you're going to go nuts. But do try to suggest that, you know, we've got, let's say, our scapulars in here. And then I've got my wing that is dropping down in here. I would just do sort of more of the same sort of thing, suggesting that detail. And if you don't want to do that for the entire surface, you don't have to. What I'll sometimes do is just give you a little bit of kind of texture on the back where it's more in the light, and then let that kind of go into more shadow on the other side. So you don't have to kind of get in there and draw that pattern in everywhere. If these little dark marks are on top of a kind of a matrix of sort of brown or here graphite gray tone, that will feel like those are marks on the back of that bird. But you don't have to get in there and draw every little one. Otherwise, out in the field, when you're doing your sketching, you're going to go crazy. On the front side of the bird, we talked before about how we have that kind of ball of the head that fits into a cone. And that then comes down on top of the belly of the bird. On the lower chest of the bird, think of it as two different zones, one over here and one over here. The feathers that are going to be kind of coming out on one side will often kind of a slightly different direction than the ones on the other. But you're going to see on a lot of birds, they will have streaks and patterns on them. And the final thing I want to share with you is a strategy of using the marks on the bird
to three-dimensionally show what is going on the bird. So if I don't want this drawing to look flat, the way I put these marks on it is going to make a really, really big difference. Right. So here's a long-eared owl, and you're taking a look up at it in the tree above you. This is a piece of paper with a series of horizontal lines across it. If I roll it into a tube and hold it straight to you, you see those as lines going straight across it. But if I tilt it at an angle, you now see those straight lines as curves up towards you. So essentially, each of these lines is making a smile. Over here, if I make a little diagram of that, I'm going to draw a little can. These are lines that are making a slight smile as they go up the can. That's where this tilted towards me. But this is up in the tree and it's tilted away from me. And so the head is going the other way. If I have my can tilted the other way, I see these as frown marks instead of smiles. What I mean by frown marks, I mean that my can is coming like this. And so the lines across it are making these little frowns. Tilted towards me, it's smiling. Tilted away from me are these frowns. Well, let's go over to that owl up there in the tree. If I draw this owl, I'm going to get us just sort of a quick little owl shape here. I'm going to draw two quick little owl shapes. Here's the side of this, here's the belly. On this first one here, if I draw the marks on the belly of this as coming across like this, see those horizontal marks on its belly? You'll get the impression of that you're at eye level with this thing, looking at the owl straight like that. But notice this curve. So watch on the photograph. So did my video drop out there for a moment?
We had it disabled for the lag, but we're coming up on time.
Okay. So over here, notice that these bars here are going this way, and then look at what happens here. You see that? By following the curve of these lines around, I am going to be able to wrap. I'm going to be able to sort of show the direction that this owl is, got itself pointed relative to me. So let's take a look at how that would look just with some of these little lines here. So if these lines are kind of coming like this, then you're getting this sense of looking up in the tree at the owl. It's got its little owly wing over here.
branch coming across like that. So by following the contours of these marks, I can carve the shapes of these owls and even suggest the direction that they are turned relative to me. You see how, actually, let me, as we come out here on these marks here on the side of this owl, we get to this point and then we turn down here. Because we are looking up at this owl, we've got the same sort of a phenomenon coming on where these lines wrap around the owl, and the direction that the lines go gives you an indication of how that animal is holding its body relative to you. If you're at eye level with it, those marks will be horizontal. And finally, this one here, look at how these lines here wrap up around the body this way. What you've got there is this body is tilted towards you slightly. Now we've got the big delay back. So that if this body is tilted towards you slightly, so that if it was a ball with an axis through it, it would be like this. You'd be seeing these lines wrapping like this. So the spots on the belly of this are going to be arching and curving around like that. So something that you can do as you are putting spots on your beastie is pay attention to the direction that those lines point, and that can help wrap you around an object. If we just go back to this little one right here, we've got a slight arc in here, kind of giving you a sense of the roundness of this head. And you see these lines here slightly kind of coming up. You're looking down more at these lines, and that helps you be able to envision this owl then as a three-dimensional little shape there. I hope that some of these strategies are going to help you fill in the bodies of the owls that you've been playing with. And also help your owl eyes, help us kind of sort of not be afraid of these like weird kind of angles in these eyes, things like those pupils with uneven dilation, and that sort of cross-eyed look that you get on that sort of far side eye. I want to encourage folks to have some fun with this. See if you can play with textures on your owls, first by blocking in major patterns of color and then coming across that with the details, with the darker things. First put in your major elements and then minor details across those.
All right, with that, we're slightly over time.
There we go. So that's a handful of owl tricks for you. And I hope that this was useful for you. Someone was asking about what white pen is that? This is a Signo Uniball gel pen. The most important thing is to have fun with this. You can let drawing owls be part of your birding experience. You also can use these tricks when you are at home on a rainy day drawing from a photograph. But want to encourage people to get out, play with those owls. You might connect with your local chapter of the Audubon Society to find socially distanced, safe field trips near you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, Thank you so much for doing the class, Jack. I'm going to do a quick final plug for our sticker giveaway. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, in case you missed it, we are going to be giving away stickers of this set done by Jack to five different people who submit to the hashtag Nature Journal Audubon. As you can see right here on the Instagram page. So this is very appropriate, Jack. What would the class's homework be for this class so that they can share this and potentially win some stickers? Are you there, Jack?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear your question.
Oh, I asked, what should everybody be doing for homework?
I want to encourage people to get out there and play with some owl sketches, to block in the shapes of those owls, and then come back over the top of that with to try to play with the texture and the camouflage patterns on part of those owls. If you do a really large one, you're going to find it's really kind of scary to do, because there's just so much camouflage that you have to do. But on a smaller sketch, you can block those in. Or if you're feeling kind of like you've got more time, go ahead and play with those patterns on the back of a larger sketch or drawing. See if you can get some of both the textures, use those marks to sort of bring out the textures and patterns of the owl, but also to kind of show where the owl's body curves. And so that you're drawing, pay attention to the directions that those lines go, and those owls won't feel flat. They're going to feel like they're rounded forms on the top of your on your page.
Okay. So once again, Jack, thank you so much for doing these classes. Everyone in the audience is really appreciating you and showing you a lot of love. And if you have the ability to give to Jack, please support him either by donating to his website or by buying art supplies on his website as well. And there are many, many more classes that Jack has done on that website. I think with that, that's the end of our time here. Thank you so much for joining us.
I also want to encourage people to join your local chapter of the Audubon Society, and to connect with like-minded nature lovers near you. In addition to that, you support conservation through the work of your local chapter of the Audubon Society. Richardson Bay Audubon does lots of wonderful stuff in my area, and I'm really grateful to them. So thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your drawing.
Take care, folks. Thank you so much.